This English news edition. Here are our headlines for this evening. Concerning the oversight plan, the government's engagement continues. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, dozens of deaths after heavy rains in Kinshasa. Thank you for joining us in our newsroom. As part of the emergency plan launched to help those affected by the heavy rains in Djibouti and the interior region of the country, the Prime Minister, accompanied by a number of members of the government, visited several sites in the city of Djibouti. During the visit, they briefed the Prime Minister and his delegation on the ongoing efforts to provide support and assistance to the families affected by the rains. The first such event in decades. The government, in cooperation with military units and civic associations, is striving to alleviate the suffering of these families, especially in the popular districts of Djibouti and Balbala. It is worth mentioning that the President of the Republic, Mr. Ismail Mergele, directed yesterday to expedite the necessary measures and means to restore the situation and enable the affected families to overcome the difficult circumstances. The Prime Minister stressed during the inspection tour the government's keenness to provide the necessary care for these families. As part of the efforts to reduce stagnant water in the main districts and streets of Djibouti, the National Gendarmerie carried out a large-scale operation this morning to clean and rinse the stagnant water in the Tur and 4 districts of Blas municipality. Hundreds of National Gendarmerie personnel participated in these cleanup operations as part of the strict instructions issued by the Chief of the National Gendarmerie, Colonel Zakaria Hassan Aden. According to the instructions of His Excellency the President Ismail Mergele, to help those affected by the recent heavy rains in the capital. To carry out these operations, all the different teams and units that make up the National Gendarmerie were mobilized and supervised by the Chief of the National Gendarmerie, Colonel Zakaria Hassan Aden. Following the severe storms that affected our country, elements of the National Police visited several districts of the capital to carry out extensive cleaning and water drainage operations. The National Police Forces, under the command of the Acting Director General Colonel Abdurrahman Al Kain, gathered very early this morning at the National Police Headquarters before being deployed in the areas most affected by the floods that make up Zone 3, namely in Neighborhood 5, 6, 7Bs and Amboli. All elements of the National Police have therefore been mobilized to assist the affected populations living in these neighborhoods, which have been severely affected by the torrential rains. The police officers went as close as possible to our fellow citizens to help them clean their homes. These residents were unable to evacuate the stagnant water into their respective homes before the arrival of the National Police, who spared no material and human effort to assist them. Also, as part of the ORSEC plan, the Coast Guard, under the leadership of the Colonel Wais Omar Bokode, commander of the Coast Guard, launched very early this morning an important rehabilitation operation for Neighborhood 6, Arhiba, Mecca al-Mukarrama, and Wadajir by mobilizing all its human and material resources in collaboration with ADR Directorate. An important delegation led by the Prime Minister, accompanied by the Minister of Housing, Environment and Urban Development, Minister of Women and the Family, and Secretary General of the Prime Minister, it came to inspect the progress of rehabilitation operations all day long. The Coast Guard, headed by Colonel Wais Omar Bokare, in collaboration with the ADR Directorate, crisscrossed Neighborhood 6, traveling from one end of the area to the other. Coast Guard doctors were also mobilized on site to assist affected families suffering from the diseases. Coast Guard paramedics are also in neighborhood 6 to transport the most serious ones. And after the flood that hit the capital last week, relief to the affected populations continues. The evacuation of water in the neighborhoods remains the priority for the time being, as well as the distribution of emergency aid released by the government. Should be noted that apart from the families identified and housed during the rainy days in schools, there are an incalculable number of families who are also homeless and housed by families. In fact, more than a third of the capital's population is affected by these floods. Most of this homeless population is traditionally housed by relatives. In addition to this family solidarity, our Islamic tradition makes solidarity and assistance a duty and an obligation. All the more reason why an infinite number of disaster victims went to the reception centers, most of them being housed by families or neighbors, as we have seen in the various districts of the capital. The national television and as well monitor the expressions of the beneficiaries of the aid provided by the government. And the beneficiaries' parents praised the government's solidarity for the affected families. Following the recent rains in the country, which caused massive flooding in the districts of Djibouti, young people jointly supported these people to support the affected people. In this regard, the government and partners have stepped up their efforts to provide necessary and appropriate support to the citizens affected by the rains. For their part, the youth on their initiative to help the people of their neighborhoods in order to provide the appropriate mechanisms to rains and get rid of this water which filled the homes of citizens and streets and led to the displacement of some of them to the places allocated by the government and partners for the benefit of the affected. The youth of the neighborhood confirmed in an interview conducted by the national television that their initiative come to support citizens rather than wait for help from the government, expressing their help to work and to equip all young people in order to stand up and stand by our brothers, they said, and clean the neighborhoods by stagnant water. Djibouti's National Water and Sanitation Authority and private companies proceeded early this morning to clear and absorb the stagnant water left by the rain of recent days. Indeed, after the rainy episodes, it is time for cleaning and mutual aid. Armed with pipes, engines, and tank trucks, Onayat and Djibouti's private companies spared no effort and distinguished themselves during the following works, in particular the elimination of stagnant water and the unclogging of drainage channels inside the Lake High School and next to the National Police Barracks on the Arta Road. Other news of this edition in his agenda for the 27 November, which focused mainly on parliamentary diplomacy, the President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamed, first received the President of the National Assembly of the Central African Republic, Lauren Ngoma Baba, in the Parliament's VIP lounge. These talks focused on the state of inter-parliamentary cooperation between the two brotherly countries of the Republic of Djibouti and the Central African Republic, as well as on subjects of common interest with a view to strengthening the joint actions of the two parliaments and their friendship groups. The President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamed, and his distinguished guests focused their discussion on ways and means strengthening Djibouti-Central African relations, particularly on their parliamentary dimension. In his cabinet, the President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamed, welcomed the Secretary General of the Arab Inter-Parliamentary Union, UPA, Faiz al-Shawabkir, taking place on the silence of the work of the UPA and in the presence of the advisor to the President of the Assembly on Arab Affairs. The meeting was an ideal opportunity to review the contribution of the Djibouti Parliament to the success of the activities of the Arab Inter-Parliamentary Union, the means of improving inter-assembly cooperation among the member states of the Arab League. As well, the President of the National Assembly, Mohamed Ali Hamad, received a courtesy visit from Alassane Bala Sekonde, President of the National Assembly of Burkina Faso and current President of the African Parliamentary Union, APU, taking place on the sidelines of the statutory meetings of the above-mentioned African organization, which have been held since 25 November at the People's Palace in Djibouti capital. This meeting was an opportunity for the two speakers to consolidate their consultation and exchange views on the issues and challenges facing the APU. In addition, the Speaker of Djibouti Parliament, his distinguished counterpart, did not fail to draw a line on the Djibouti's bilateral cooperation with Ouagadougou, stressing lastly that these secular relations mainly by the two countries must be strengthened. And for his part, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Mohamed Ali Hamad, pointed out the importance of this meeting, which he held with the Speaker of the House of the Representatives. Within the framework of the policy of permanent consultation set by the Minister of Budget with the private sector, the team in charge of draft tax procedures for the year 2000, led by the Secretary General of the Budget, Mr. Mohamed Said, held a working session at the Chamber of Commerce with employers in professional organizations. During this meeting, officials of the Ministry of Budget and representatives of taxpayers were briefed on the consideration of their proposals in the draft law. This step comes within the framework of the desire of the Minister of Budget to work with the private sector and the participation of the Chamber of Commerce in the preparation of all tax reforms on the table. With the great sadness and sorrow, we received the news of the death of Mrs. Dahabo Miguel Arab, who passed away yesterday evening at the Sudanese hospital. And the deceased was born in 1959. She left 3 children and 3 grandchildren, the aunt of Fairuz Ahmed Hussein, an employee of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We all pray the Almighty to welcome her in his eternal paradise and inspires her family with patience in souls. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Moving on to the international news, at least 36 people were killed in heavy rains overnight in Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo. Deputy Governor Nero Ponkogo said Tuesday. Dini Musa has more to tell us.
41 people died on Tuesday in Kinshasa, victims of heavy rain that caused Monday night to Tuesday floods, landslides in a capital where the Congolese authorities are struggling to fight urban poverty planning. The working class districts, mainly on the heights of Kinshasa, were the most affected. About 15 people died in Lemba, the one most affected by these heavy rains, according to a provisional assessment. Lemba has suffered a series of landslides that have swallowed up houses, reported Top Congo Radio.
Increased numbers of migrants are arriving in Serbia. Details with Dini Musa.
More and more migrants are arriving in Serbia. They cross Turkey, Greece, Albania, and Kosovo. In the city of Kanjiza, 15 kilometers from the Serbian-Hungary border, there are about 300 migrants on the Serbian side. They live in the city center, but they sleep in the forest or in the old station. Most refugees on the Serbian side of the Serbian-Hungarian border live in this way. They want to move to Western Europe as soon as possible, even if it's not easy. The Serbian authorities also want them to leave. Migrants receive neither food nor shelter in Serbia.
Earth's temperature has risen year after year, leading the world to set targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions years ago. Explanations in this video.
The carbon emission curve is not reversed. In its latest annual report, the United Nations Environment Programme makes an alarming new statement on climate change and encourages countries to drastically increase the pace of ecological transition. For the moment, the carbon emissions curve is not reversed. Experts worry. The latter report stresses that states must reduce their carbon emission by 7.6% per year from next year and by half until 2030 to keep the hope of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees compared to the pre-industrial era. The UN has set up priority courses of action banning new coal-fired power plants in China, massive development of a public transport network in India, or new zero-emission cars by 2030 in the United States.
It is with these images we close our edition. Thank you for joining us on the radio television of Djibouti and have a good night.